Recording in progress.
For the second plenary session. Okay, without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Kamal Kitty for his talk on HE Crossroads, Threats and Opportunities. And Dr. Kamal Kitty will be assisted by Miss Maria as the moderator. Miss Maria, the screen is
Hello.
yours.
Okay. Hello, dear ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. How are you today? I hope we are all in good condition and healthy, both physically and mentally. Welcome to our second plenary session in the 16th e-learning forum Asia 2021. First, let me introduce myself. I am Maria Brahman Widiantari. I will be serving as the moderator for the session. In this lovely afternoon, we'll be hearing a presentation from our distinguished speaker, Dr. Patrachar Komokiti from Learning Innovation Center, Chulalongkorn University, Bangkok, Thailand. For the participants, if you have any question during the presentation time, you can type the question in the chat box in Zoom that will be answered later by Dr. Komokiti. The question in the chat can use the template, your name, underscore presenter's name, and followed by question. Now, moving along to our session, please welcome Dr. Kamal Kitty, who will be speaking to us about higher education crossroads, threats, and opportunities. Hello, Dr. Kamal Kitty, how are you?
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me. So,
yes, all right.
Thank you, Maria.
Yes, for the next 25 minutes, the screen and time is yours. You may start the presentation.
All right, thank you. So please allow me to share my presentation then, right? So I hope you can see it.
It's still loading.
Still loading, right? Hold on. Is it up? Sorry. Okay, is it up?
Yep.
All right. So great. Thank you. Thank you for having me. So for this afternoon, I would like to share to you about the current scenarios that we are facing in education. And of course, these are all related to other disciplines as well. And many of the examples that I'm raising today would of course be from many other disciplines beside education, but these are all applicable. So hopefully this would be useful to most of you, not only just in higher education, but in any other disciplines. Okay. Let me introduce myself again. My name is Patrachar Komokiti. I'm currently the Director of Learning Innovation Center of the Chulalongkorn University. I'm also currently serving as the Acting Director of the Office of Academic Affairs of the university as well. And right now I am serving as the Chair of ELFA or Alpha. Right. So I am from Chulalongkorn University, so allow me just 1 minute to just introduce the affiliation I'm from. Chulalongkorn University is from Thailand. We are currently normally considered as #1 in Thailand. We are top ranking. In QS World Ranking, we are recognized as one of the best university in Thailand. And in terms of the academic reputation, we are in the world's top 100 for the second consecutive year. Now for the Thai Entire, we have the impact ranking of #1 in Asia or number 23 in the world. And we are so keen in developing in terms of the sustainability. So we are in the central Bangkok. So if anyone have ever gone to Bangkok before, I hope that you have seen our university, which is lovely. All right. So today's topic is about the crossroad. And of course, we cannot deny that the current scenario that we are facing is huge because of the pandemic, right? One of the reasons that I cannot be there with the host today is because of the COVID-19. And people have been comparing COVID to many things. But I myself, personally, I prefer to compare COVID with some sort of wave or tsunami of water of some kind that are rushing through and impact all of our lives, basically, right? So, well, if you think about water or oceans or waves, we normally think of the way that we travel, right? There has been a meme that says that the world right now is looking like a ship that is sinking, basically. But we as teachers, we sort of pretend that nothing is happening, and then we keep on going on ourselves as a teacher teaching online, and seems like these musicians are playing on this ship, basically, right? It's just a meme, but at least it shows that we have the ability to keep on doing our lives and going on with our discipline, basically, right? But of course, these are just some jokes. But the reality is more complicated than that, right? The challenges that we are facing right now, especially for the educators like us, is that we are currently changing ourselves, right? If any of you were like me, that were in schools like 20 years ago, these would be familiar scenarios, right? You will see our teacher writing on boards of some kind, either whiteboard or blackboard, and then basically, using those boards to teach us about several stuff. So basically, the skill that the teacher or professor has to have would be the board writing skill, basically. You have to have good handwriting. You have to have the ability to see whether the drawing of yours or a writing of yours is legible, basically. But now when computer came along, all our skills change, right? We no longer need to write on the board. We only need to be able to create beautiful PowerPoint slides, basically, and then convey our ideas or teaching through those slides, and with only very few writings. But basically, the two cases are somewhat similar. You're still talking directly to the student, right? Either in the classroom or some hallway, right? But basically, you are using either the blackboard, whiteboard, or in this case, the projector to teach to people in the same room. But now when COVID came, the problem is that we are now no longer in this scenario, but rather we are conducting our class in this fashion instead, right? So instead of talking to people in the same room, now we're talking among ourselves through microphone, and then talking to students in some kind. So teacher has to adjust and adapt, of course, right? So we thought, okay, we were able to talk in the classroom, then we should be able to talk with a microphone and with a computer, right? But the answer is not quite, because if any of you were like me, when you teach a class in a room, what you are doing is not just simply talking among yourself, but rather you are watching and looking and observing the student as well. But now when these are replaced by the computer, perhaps this is a very familiar scenario that many of you have seen, especially in the Asian world, because we are in Asia, right? Most of the Asian students are somewhat reserved, and then they would rather turn off their camera. So it becomes that you just talk to yourself, basically, right? That actually yesterday there was a joke in the social media that simply states, if you are in a relationship that you are only asking on one side, then it's not a relationship. It means that you are a teacher, because you're just asking and no one responds. Because in this case, all the students turn off their microphone, turn off their computer, and you are not even sure whether they understood whatever that you mentioned, right? So that means the technique that you have been developing, either from the age of blackboard, whiteboard, or even from projector, is no longer working. You can't use those same techniques anymore, but rather you have to redesign everything. We have to redesign everything, right? You were basically conducting classes in the fashion that were on the lower left here, right? Lower left here. You were all familiar with traditional on-campus learning, right? You could do all this, right? In the class, you talk to students in your classroom, looking in their eyes and seeing whether they understand something, then you can get on, right? But now you are switching almost abruptly to what is on the upper right, right? You have to be teaching online, but then the problem is that you cannot use the same pedagogy to conduct those classes. So in other words, what we would prefer is to have some sort of blended learning, right? So you can't just use Zoom to teach a course, and you cannot just use videos to teach a course, but you rather combine all of them together. So it's not just a blended learning, but blended online. So it implied that you have to redesign the whole thing in order to make sure that what you teach could be understood, right? Could be understood by the student, right? So these are all the design point that you have to be able to adjust to, right? And when I mentioned the word crossroad, it means that this is where we are right now. We have to be able to figure out the new way of teaching, okay? And we are not alone, right? We are not alone, of course. Everyone has to redesign the whole thing. But the problem that means is that when everyone redesign the whole thing, if someone redesign faster, then it means you are left behind, basically. You cannot catch up, okay? So the first threat that comes right away from this new world is that when you are saying that your class is online, right? That means it's good in terms of accessibility. Okay? Student can be anywhere, right? Student may be on his or her bed. Student may be on the other side of the world. They can study with you. Right? But it also implies that those same students can also have the content from anyone else too, right? Let's say you are teaching calculus. It doesn't mean that if the student taking your class has to listen to you alone. Student can study from whoever that teach calculus from anywhere in the world, right? That means that the value of your content, of your ability to convey those knowledge may be less and less and less every single day, right? Because of the accessibility, it implies that previously we were so sure that you could basically control how well your knowledge is imparted to the student. But now when the accessibility came, that means the ability for the student to value your content become less and less and less, because now we no longer care about the stock knowledge, but rather we care about the ability to develop learning, and rather instead we would rather be able to understand this, right? So instead of storing knowledge, we become educated. The student become saying that, well, those knowledge could be looked up later on. And it implies that they would rather concentrate on something else, right? So we were there on the orange arrow about a couple of years ago, right? But right now, when all the courses, when all the classes are on video, that means that they could be accessible from anywhere, right? And the value of the stock knowledge would be less and less, but rather we would rather have the information accessibility at any time and anywhere because of the connectivity, right? In that case, then the values would be reduced. In other words, your value is being reduced, okay? You have to keep up with the more important part instead of just the knowledge, which I'm going to mention a little bit later. The second things that comes with those accessibility is that it also implies that not only you could teach, right? Someone else could teach. And student may not necessarily just study with you. They could study with anyone else, okay? That means that there are huge amount of competitions. What competition I'm talking about? This is a nice infographic, right, about the global learning landscape. It talks about different kinds of entities in the education world that concentrate on both, whether it's knowledge, new model, experiencing learning, international education, learning support, so many things. There are so many things, right? If you were like me, if you are from higher education or university, do you know where you are? You are there. On the lower left, and that's small windows that says university, which implies that there are so many other people are doing something related to education right now, and you're just a small part of that. And that also implies that you can study from anywhere. There are MOOCs that student can study. There are many other channels that they can have educate themselves. So you will become less and less and less important. Okay? So this is a huge threat, because now industry can say, well, university is just a so small part of that. why do we need to care about it, right? So this is a huge threat coming your way. And third, this is quite important because of the whole paradigm shifts that occurs around us. What does paradigm shift mean? Okay, I think I better start with some simple ideas about the revolutions that occurs around it, right? So throughout the ages of human, right, we have the several revolutions occurs, right? The first industrial revolution occurs about 200 years ago. Okay, that when the steam engine occurs, there are mechanical manufacturing, right? And then second industrial revolution, we have electricity, we have mass productions. Third revolution is you start having computers, and right now we are in the world of fourth revolution that we have the Internet of Things and others. Okay. On your right, these are the talents that people are concentrating on in each of those ages. If you are 200 years ago, and you start having steam engine, that means that the physical labors are the important. Right? Now later on, when you start having mass production, then standardization becomes. Next, when we move on to the computer world, then the disciplinary and deep expertise and STEM become important. Okay? But now, once we move into the current fourth industrial revolutions about the internet with the cyber physical system, actually, the interdisciplinary become more important. The learning agility become more important. Adaptability become more important. Okay? Please keep in mind these couple of keywords because it's going to pop up in the way that we have to shape our business in order to keep up with this world. Okay? So we have to have agility, we have to have adaptability, and interdisciplinary. So deep sense of understanding of a certain discipline may not be as valued as others. Right? So with these progress in industrial revolution, what do we see? What do we see? What are the examples of that? Okay. Of course, you can look at these slides. Oh, sorry about the number though. This number that I obtained from Peter McGowan is a little bit outdated, about 4 years ago, but still, it's still relevant. You can easily see the value of the industry in different ages. Right? If you go back 100 years, those companies that are most valuable are about extracting value from natural assets like gas and oil and electricity, those kind of things. 50 years ago, it was about the productivity. You have to have the production of human-made assets, right? You have the factories and so on. But right now, well, actually, the number one company perhaps exceeds the 1 trillion in values already. But they are about digital assets, right? They are about the company that basically learning faster than the other by using digital technology and no longer deep in any particular field, but rather so diverse and have the interdisciplinary of taking over, right? Apple, for instance, Apple is not number one because of the huge technology, but rather Apple is number one because they can combine art and science together, right? People love beautiful phones. People love their beautiful product because of the art and science that they combine. Basically. So you have to have the ability to understand interdisciplinary, okay? Not just a deep tech. Now, how does all these 4 steps of revolution changes? Right? So if you plot this over time and you will start seeing that how stuff change over the years would coincide with how fast the changes occurs around us, right? At the beginning of the first revolution, you have steam engine. Well, people learn about steam engine and then they can utilize that. It takes another 100 years to come up with different kind of engine, right? And it takes about 50 years to have the communication, the internet, mobile internet of things, and then things start speeding up. Okay? Now, it implies that if you look at the life expectancy and lifetime of people, you would see that each paradigm shift, which is noted by a triangle, right? Each paradigm shifts could take over multiple lifetimes, which means that what you encounter in your life back then would basically be about the same because there's no shift in your lifetime. But now, if you are in current age, what you are normally sees is a paradigm shift every couple of years. If you go back 10 years ago, things were not the same. Right now, every 10 years or so, or even in a few years or so, things start changing. You have new application, new ability, new kind of business, new model, so on and so forth. That implies that what you studied 10 years ago may no longer be relevant, right? So keep looking at that. It implies that in your lifetime, you may see a couple of paradigm shifts and you have to readjust, you have to relearn, you have to redo the whole thing, which implies that what we are doing right now as an education may not work, right? You have the 4-year programs for bachelor degrees. When those students graduate and work for a couple of years, their knowledge in their college, in their bachelor degree, may already be obsolete. So students are asking, why do we have to waste 4 years? When in fact, they would rather keep doing the real thing because things are going to change anyway. So the key word is that when stuff change, what you have as your asset that you thought would be the important things, and you thought that you know better than them, right? Well, this is what I studied. This is what I learned 20 years ago. So I'm the best in this field. So you would have a mindset of teaching the best. But the problem is, if things around you change too fast, then it means what you knew may not be relevant anymore. So rather, instead of keeping yourself as saying that teacher knows best and you have to decide the whole thing so that the studying would be better or the best for the student, I would rather say that student opinions has become more and more important, and you have to listen to them. And you have to utilize them and then ask them to learn proper things and listen to them whether this is still relevant. Because, well, let's face it, you can be obsolete as soon as possible. Now, let me ask you this simple question. Say, well, because you say, well, you know best, right? And you have to know what would be the good things for a student. So, in other words, if these are the things that you are still teaching your students, would that still be relevant? Are you still teaching students for penmanship? Or is your child or your children are still forced in your classroom about penmanship? You have to have nice handwriting. Penmanship was actually important a couple of 100 years ago, because at that time you have to have your handwriting be legible, because otherwise it would be useless, right? That's why you have to practice the penmanship. But right now everyone is using computer. Why do you need good handwriting? It's no longer relevant, right? But in other words, if you're teaching it, but you think of it as calligraphy, now that's another story, right? Because that's art, right? Art means you have creativity and so on and so forth. So you have to concentrate the right way. You no longer care about penmanship because you can use computer, but calligraphy is still okay, right? Or for the other example, you thought, well, you're using computer, right? You have to practice typing, right? When I was in my high school, they have class about typing. You have to type as fast as possible. But let me ask you, this is still important. When right now the kids are not typing, but rather they talk to their machine, right? And those machines pick up those words and then type it for them. Then would typing be still relevant, right? These are skills that whether or not you have to emphasize. Or even in some classes that when I was in school, I was taught about this, right? You have to be able to do table lookup. You calculate something and you look up the table and find the answer. My question is it still important? Do you still need to teach your student to do table lookup when right now computer can do all that for you? Why do you need table lookup, right? So all these skills are become more and more relevant in figuring out whether it still be needed for your students. So when these things change really quickly, the old mode of economy that we will design the whole thing around our life would be on the upper part, right? You design the society so that we first educate, right? We spend the first 20 years or so in your education, primary, secondary, in university. And then when you graduate, you work, right? You spend your life for perform workings, and then later on you retire. The reasons that you could do that, because as I mentioned, there were no paradigm shifts in your lifetime. So whatever that you study in your school could still be relevant in your work. But right now, as things change really quickly, So we can't just concentrate our education on the early age of your life alone, but rather you have to design the education and shape it as the learning instead. So the new model would suggest that rather than having the education as a program for the first couple of years of your life, then you have to redesign your university so that it can serve the learning purpose for your whole life and your performance as an engagement up there. And then instead of retiring, can think of it as reconditioned instead, right? Because if you cannot do that, then you can no longer engage. So these are the things that you have to reshape in terms of design a university. And of course, last but not least, the threats that are among ourselves are related to VUCA. Okay, I think you have seen this nomenclature before, right? VUCA. What does it stand for? It's a problem that occurs around us, right? VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, right? Volatility, it means things that it's not stable. It can change whenever, and there are many other factors, right? Uncertainties, well, you are so sure. We just heard about Omicron, right? So there are many. Complexity, how do you solve the problem that you see no root cause? And ambiguity means, well, that we are not so sure, how it would turn out in each of the cases. So all of these become the threat that interfere with many industries, not just the education. But hopefully, we have some opportunities in solving this. Okay, so we have VUCA, so it also means we can have VUCA prime. Right? VUCA prime is the counter technique that would chime them so that how will you encounter VUCA. If you have volatility, then you have to have propositions. Right? Uncertainty, a lot of uncertainty, then it means that you have to try to make the sense of understanding try to simplify. Complexity as well. There's a clarity that you can gain with that. And last but not least, when I mentioned ambiguity, I think the keyword is agility to counter with ambiguity. And if you recall, that word agility coincides with what the talent that we are looking for in the fourth industrial revolution. That means that the way that we design how the education performs is so must be agile. Right? Second, as I mentioned, you have to raise the problem and try to reduce the mindset of teacher know best. This is an example of the student engagement that you have to raise. This is what occurs in Chulalongkorn University. We receive an award in terms of the student engagement. But in fact, we put the student in the curriculum design. We can't just say, well, teacher know best, so we design this stuff for you. But we actually put students in there and let them have the opinion on how the teaching being conducted. Okay, or in this case, we have the a paper being published about how the impact of the student could occur by themselves. We have a MOOC system, MOOC platform on our university. What we found is that we integrate MOOC with Facebook. And what we found is that when there is a completion from one of the participants, and that participant posts a certificate on that, we actually found that the level of activities in our platform increased. It implies with the direct correlations that when this kind of social behavior, the students have the level of engagement among themselves and then can raise their level of awareness among themselves too. And you as a teacher, instead of controlling everything, we have to look at this BIKW triangle, right? Pyramids. And we will see that instead of right now, we are not only providing students with data, information, or knowledge, but rather we would rather look at the top of this pyramid and you see that we would instead focus on the wisdom. Don't just tell the student what happened or what could happen, but it's up to you that would guide them to tell them what should we do in order to survive in all this and study this. Because information and knowledge, they can gain from anywhere, but wisdom is up to you. Okay? So this is a true value of the educators. And almost finally, lifelong learning is the opportunity that would give us the way that would allow the educations to continue, right? I already showed you